Chav Beis Amid Beis by the Mishnah. Today's daf is Chav Gimel. As far as our viewers are concerned, and we start from the Mishnah Chav Beis Amid Beis in the bottom. Shevuos sheloi oichel v'achal v'shasa. A guy makes a shevuah he's not going to eat, and he ends up eating and drinking. Einoi chayiv ela achas. He's only chayiv one carbon. Obviously, if it's b'shoigig, b'mezid it's malchus. Shevuos sheloi oichel v'sheloi eshta. What if he specifies in the Shevuah and he says, I'm not going to eat and I'm not going to drink, v'ochal v'shasa, then chayav shtayim. Why? Because when he specifies achil and shtia, that counts as two Shevuos. Al kol echad ve'echad. Yeah, do we have on that? We have a. Was that the thing, Rashi?
Yeah, it's a little different.
Okay, we'll see. Let's see.
Yeah.
Shevuah shaloi oichal. A person says Shevuah shelo eichel stam, ends up eating different kinds of muffins, different kinds of breads. He's only chayav one.
So this only has the drinking; it doesn't have the eating too. Really should have put a piece of bread in the stand also.
Oh, here we go. So we're not to eat food. Shevuah shelo eichel, and he drinks. So the Mishnah says in chayav achas. Right. Unless he says, right. That's the first case of the Mishnah. This guy for sure not Jewish. No. Okay, so b'kitzur, let's go weiter. So if he specifies on the pas as well, and he says Shevuah shelo oichel pas chitin, pas orin, pas kusman, v'ochal, then chayav kol achas v'achas, because he specified each pas. Shevuah shelo eshte stam wasn't specifying v'shosa mashkin harbe. He drank all kinds of mashkin and chayav l'achas. Shevuah shelo eshte yayin v'shemen udvash. And he ends up drinking each of them, because in his Shevuah he specified, I'm not going to drink from each one separately. So it counts as separate Shevuahs. If he said, I'm not going to eat, and he ate, let's say, ofar, stuff that you can't eat, potter is potter. Because when he says oichel, he means the Shevuah is only chal on something that is edible, not something which is not edible, so he's not over in anything, he's potter. What if he says Shevuah shelo oichel v'achal nevelis, a treifis, shkotzim, or ramosim? Again, we saw yesterday, those are dvar achila. You can eat it, it's just you're not allowed to, right? We said the last couple of words before the Mishnah, are you d'ravi aloye? Right? It's just a lion crouching over that food, but the etzim, it's bar achila, so there the chachamim say chayiv, you're chayiv, that's a violation of the Shevuah, for Reb Shimon pater, Reb Shimon paters. Now, why does Reb Shimon pater? Rashi quickly says here, the Gemara is already going to ask later, how could the Chachamim argue on that? But the more logical opinion on the surface is Reb Shimon, because Rashi says, and he's already mush b'va'imar Sinai. So it's not chal, if you make a Shevuah shelo oichel, it's not chal on a veil of treifis, because that you already are pre-mushba. And you can't swear on something you're mushban already, in a dvar mitzvah. That's Reb Shimon paters. Oh, now Omar, if he says koinam. Now, by the way, what's koinam? A koinam is a lashon of a carbon. A carbon is a lashon of a neder, because neder is chefza. He says koinam ishti nehenesli. I aser my wife from having anah from me imachalti ayoim if I ate today. And it turns out who achal nevelas treifus shkotzim ermasim, and he take ate dvarim asurim. Then harei ishte asura. Here his wife is asur, even according to Reb Shimon, that says you're potter if you swear I'm not going to eat and then you end up eating the rest of the you're potter. Here by Nedarim, you're chayiv. Why? Because only a Shevuah is not chal on a dvar mitzvah, because a Shevuah can't be chal on another Shevuah, and we're all mush b'va'imid. But a neder works mechanically very different. A neder is chal on the chefza, right? An isser Torah is always on the gavra, so you can't apply another isser on yourself if you already have an isser. But the food itself is not aser. It's a kainim. It's only a carbon asers, a kainim, and neder asers. The chefza, and so mela it's chal. That kainim is chal even on a veil of tribes. You say kainim ishtines mechalti ayoim, so that is called an achila, and therefore ishtay asura. He asers his wife. His wife becomes aser.
He explains because these are still considered edible.
Yeah.
It's not like awful.
You know what? I stand corrected. I apologize. I made it complicated. It's not so complicated. It's because he asked his wife, and his wife is mutter, So he asked his wife. So his wife becomes asr if he eats a dvar achila. Now, why would Reb Shimon be moida to this? Right? Why would Reb Shimon be moida? Because the only reason Reb Shimon argues is because he made a shvu on the nevelas atrefis. But if he didn't make a shvu, it's certainly dvar achila. I mean, why don't you say is mushba va'omed?
Because nevelas and trevis are also.
In other words, just because it's asr doesn't make it doesn't take it out from a dvar achila. It's still a dvar achila.
On one hand, it's a dvar achila.
It's like as a
right lashon, but it's
it's like a good mashal.
It's intangible. It's still physically.
It's physically a dvar achila. If he said, "I'm not,"
It's edible. It's edible is the right word.
Right.
it's edible.
It's something that can be eaten,
Right.
but it's mushba v'oimed.
He's also.
But it could still be eaten. What?
So you said it's not the. When he says, I swear I'm not going to eat an avela, or I'm not going to eat food and eats an avela.
Yeah.
He's already not allowed to eat an avela.
Right.
Here you don't have that. It's not.
Because it's not a conflict in what he said. He said, "I asked her my wife if I ate today." This is called eating. That's what he's saying. Yeah, it's called eating. Right. It's edible. Like Doctor's saying, it's edible. He didn't make anything on the food. He didn't say anything.
It's not about food.
He's just a tanai. The food is just a tanai. Well, if I ate, yeah, super simple. Okay, thank you. So the Gemara, Omer Rabbi Chibar, Oven Shmuel, Shevuos shelo oichel v'shasa chayiv. If a guy said, "I'm not going to eat," and he ended up drinking, that's the picture we showed. Okay, that's the correct picture. You can show it again. Let's go. Yeah.
Shtia is including achila.
Oh, so here, this is the case. I swear not to eat food, and he drinks. That was the case. Right? In the Mishnah, by the way, what's the Mishnah's case? The Mishnah's case was, he swore he's not going to drink, and he's not going to eat.
And drink together.
No, the first case was, I'm not going to eat, and he ate and he drank.
Right.
This, he said, I'm not going to eat, and he only drank. That's the chiluk. So Shmuel says, Shevuos shelo oichel v'shasa chayiv. Why is he chayiv? Ibo say mesvara, ibo say mekra. Ibo say mesvara, da'amali inish l'chavei nitamida v'ayle v'achli v'shasu. Because that's how people talk, right? It's really, you go after lashon b'nei adam, and if people usually call a shtia an achila, a te'ima, then that is included in achila. That's it. In the way people in language. And by the way, is it true even for today?
Yeah.
Is that the way we speak today as well?
Why
don't you come over a bite to eat and you just give him some tea? That's
All the time.
Do you eat soup or do you drink soup?
That's a shaila, by the way.
That's what I'm saying.
Do you need a kazayas or a revius for burn nefashis? If it's mashka, it's revius. If it's kazayas.
If I make a shvuos, I have soup.
Can you have soup? Right. That's the case. Mama's the case, right?
You know, when you sit down to eat, any soda, you always have water. Drink with it. Doesn't have water if it's hot or cold.
Right. Right.
In general.
Right. So, no, it always goes with the food, but the question is,
Wine, water, when they
say, like, come to house to eat. You don't say, come to house to eat and
people,
drink.
you come to someone's house, they say, you want
Exactly.
No, I'll just take a water.
Right.
well, that's when you say no, I'll take a water. But like, would you feel that somebody fulfilled his obligation? Listen, why don't you come over for a suit? Then all he serves you is a drink. Right? It depends what kind of drink he serves you, I guess. Right? If it's no, because here it's very interesting because the Gemara is saying svara. What's a svara? That if you make a shvuah, I'm not going to eat, and you end up drinking, even if you drink alone without eating, you're chayiv already, because it says. The Omer le inish l'chavei nitay midi. If a person says, "Come over for a bite," va'ayli va'achli v'shasu. So here the case is you give him food and drink, but I don't know. Would it be appropriate if he only gave him a drink?
If he opened his refrigerator door and he saw nothing else was in the fridge.
Okay,
That's all he had.
that's okay. That's the Gemara. The Gemara is assuming that it's even drink alone is included in achila. Okay. So anybody, if I invite you over for Suda for Shabbos, don't have too much expectations. V'iboy is a makra. And if you want to say, it's a pasuk. Shtia b'chlal achila, damak shlokish menayin the shtia. Shi b'chlal achila. How do we know that shtia is included in achila? Shnem b'chal t'nei Hashem l'kecha, b'mokam asher yivchar, l'shaken shmei sham. You should come bring it in the place where Hashem chose to rest, to dwell, His name there. By the way, if you notice, never in the Torah does it mention the word Yerushalayim. Right? It says Ba'makom asher yivchar l'shaken shmei sham. Always says. Hashem never says the word in the Torah Yerushalayim. The Ramban Parshas Korach has an arichas. There's a reason for it. Why doesn't
In
Tanakh?
Yerushalayim,
Yeah,
I think Yerushalayim.
no, Tanakh. Yeah, in Torah, Chamisha Chamshe Torah. Even a Sefer Dvarim. You know, here I have a pasuk of a Makom Asher Yivchal Shakesh Meisham. The Rabbana Parshas Kayachas and Arichas. Why? Because Hashem purposely didn't give us the location. He said, "I chose a place. Now you have to seek it out." Part of Yerushalayim is l'shichnai sidrishu ubasa shama. There has to be a drisha. You have to seek out Hashem, the resting place of Hashem. And that's why, not to get involved in a different conversation, but David HaMelech in Tehillim says that Nishba asher nishba v'nodal avir Yaakov im eten shnas le'enoi. If I ever fall asleep until at emtza mokim mishkenes Yaakov, till I find the place. David HaMelech is credited with the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Because he was the one. And Tanakh describes he was sitting in a palace of Arozim, the Beis of Arozim, and he saw that Hashem, the Aaron was in a tent, and he says, "What? I'm sitting in a palace, the Aaron is in a tent." And from that point forward, he didn't sleep until he found the place. So now
Then he
it,
Shmuel Hanavi, and they sat up all night till they located the Makom Mishkan.
so the way they located it actually was, that there was a Magefa, because David HaMelech counted the Jews, and then the Magefa spread and it stopped by the Goyren of Arna Yavusi, by a certain place. Anyway, so they knew that's how they found actually the place. It came through a Magefa. The Ramban Parshas Korach says, why did it have to come through a plague? Because it actually was connected to the Yidden. Yidden died because they didn't bother searching out the place where Hashem was supposed to rest. So that was a whole other conversation. But it says in the Torah, "B'makam asher yivchar l'shakan shmeisham," you should bring it ma'aser degancha, your ma'aser to roshcha, the tirosh. And what's tirosh? Tirosh is chamro, uksiv, and the beginning of the pasuk describes it v'achalta. So it's achila is called shtiyas b'chlal achila from this pasuk. Asks the Gemara, how do you know that tirosh is liquid, is shtiya? Maybe v'dilma idea nigrain. Maybe we're talking about a nigrain. What's a nigrain? Rashi said it's a min meichel. It's a type of food.
Nigron זה שמן זית עם מיץ סלק. מיץ סלק.
In mitzelik with beet juice.
Beet juice.
Beet juice.
The Gemara Brachas talks about this, right? What bracha you make on it?
Okay, what bracha do you make on a
I don't
nigrain?
remember, but I think there's a whole shayla.
Shahakol not a because but it's a food. It's a food.
I don't know, maybe a etz. You could say a etz on it. I don't know.
It's mixed with wine. That's the point. So mamela.
Sangria, isn't that similar?
Which one?
Sangria.
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 Oh, is that
That's a mixture of wine.
is that a word in English? Let's go to
It's a
yeah.
type of
No,
wine.
it's like they put fruit in the wine. It's like that. Drinks, like
They mix the wine into the.
It's like
Mixed wine.
party drink. I don't know.
Okay. But
I wonder if
here,
it's the same word.
interesting.
Sangria, negro.
Very interesting. But here it's a food though. It's an actual food. It's not a drink.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the Gemara is asking. Maybe the reason why v'chalta.
מיץ סלק.
Yeah, maybe the v'chalta is on tirosh. It's not going on tirosh, which is real.
ואחות למ"ה עמוד ב'.
There you go.
Okay.
הנגרון, מאה דסלקה.
Okay. Beautiful.
Well, the Gemara
So-
says Maya Desalka right here.
Right. The Adam Rabbi Shmuel and Nigron Maya the Silky. Achsigrain. What's achsigrain? What does he translate in the art scroll in the English? What's achsigrain, doctor? What do you got?
Beet water.
Is Maya the kula silky? Any vegetable juice sounds like that's Maya the kula silky. So either way, what we're talking about over here in terms of tirosh is not chamro. So you don't have a raya that shti is bechlal achila, because here we might be talking about food that has wine in it. Elam merachah bar Yaakov u'mahacha. I have a different pasuk. But asat va'kesev b'chol ha'shta'av nafshecha. B'boker v'atzoyin v'yayin v'sheichar. So you see, yayin chamru. And it says yayin, which is chamru, which is wine. Iksiv v'achalta. And it says the word v'achalta at the end of that pasuk. So you see that shtiya is called achila. But don't like to ask the Marchanami there nigroin. Maybe over here too it's a nigroin. Here, the Gemara says here you can't say that. Why? Because sheikher ksiv. Together with yain it says also sheikher. So it means midi the meshaker. Has to be some alcoholic beverage, right? Food usually is not meshaker. V'dilma dveila ke'ilis. Maybe it's pressed figs. And we know the Tanya learned in the Braisa ochel dveila ke'ilis v'shasa dvash v'cholov v'nichnas lamikdash V'ovad chayiv. So that's a midi de meshaker, a disoriented person. So for disoriented person, that's why you're chayiv. A kohen is not allowed to walk into the Beis Hamikdash and do the avodah, because that's considered something which is meshaker. So how do you know that sheikhar proves that yayin is liquid? Because sheikhar is meshaker. You need sheikhar that's meshaker. I found you a case of sheikhar that's meshaker. That's also achila. That's actual food. So you still don't have a raya that shti is b'chlal achila. Elo gomar sheikhar min nazir. We learn gzeir shava sheikhar from nazir mala halon yayin. By nazir it's for sure yayin. Afkan yayin. And therefore, you see, once you prove that the yayin over there in the pasuk, by the context of Ma'aser Sheni, it's called v'achaltos, you have a raya from a pasuk also that shti is b'chlal achila. Omar Rava, so you have a svara and a pasuk. By the way, why do you need both? If it's a svara, the Gemara sometimes asks, if it's svara, lama likra, why do you need a pasuk if it's a svara? The Gemara has, it sounds like, and the Mefarshim say, it sounds like the svara is not such a strong svara. Anytime the Gemara is backing you up with a pasuk, kind of like bringing two proofs, it must be that the svara on its own isn't that strong. And I think the reason why it's not that strong is like we spoke earlier, because what is the Gemara saying? The Gemara says the svara is when a person invites somebody else to eat, he gives him food and drink. But you don't see from the svara that when a person says come over to eat, he just gives him the drink alone. That's kind of like that's a questionable svara. It could be for that reason the Gemara also brings the pasuk. Unlike other places, the Gemara would ask, "Is svara hi lama likra?"
Because we always rather not use the pasuk, right? That's the general.
Yeah, if you have a svara, right, it's
like an extra.
You don't need it.
Pasuk,
Yeah, exactly.
We have a Rambam, of course, the Yera. He says, "Yukach no mi'at mayim."
Okay.
When he invited the malachim.
Yeah.
The famous Rashi over there that says,
Aydei shliach.
"Tzadikim oinu mat v'asihar."
Ah, yeah, that's right.
So he was in Lashon just very simplistically, but then he prepares a whole big dish,
Right.
a whole big meal. So it's a different area of the woods, maybe.
Uh-huh.
This is opposed to where the cup.
Another. This is the way people should speak. Say a little.
So it encompasses a large area: drinking and inviting to eat.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that's maybe why you need svara and the pasuk,
Mm-hmm.
because the svara itself is not enough by itself.
Because that's just the way people speak.
I'll just do
Amar ma'at v'asei harbe.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So
Yeah.
you need more than svara.
Okay, beautiful. Omar Rava. Again, Baruch Hashem, we got Rava again on this daf. Afan anamatinina Shevuos sheloi oichal v'ochal v'shasa. It's a raya from the Mishnah. Because the first case of the Mishnah was Shevuos sheloi oichal v'ochal v'shasa ein chayv la'achas. Sounds like there's a chiddush. Even if though you just said sheloi oichal and you did two violations on the Shevuah of sheloi oichal. What were the violations? You ate and you drank. Still you're in chayv la'achas. If you talk and tell me shtia is included in achila, now it's a chotan l'shmina, then chayv la'achas. That's a chiddush that even though you said Shevuah sheloi oichal and you ended up eating, so to speak, twice, right? Because shtia is b'chlal achila. Then there's a chiddush in a chayv la'achas. Eliyam et shtia lav b'chlal achila. But if you're going to tell me shtia has nothing to do with achila, then Shevuah sheloi oichal v'ochal v'asam alacham yitzach la'ashmeina and then chayv la'achas. Would there be a chiddush if a guy says Shevuah sheloi oichal, then he eats and he goes to work? You're going to be, ain't a chayv la'achas. No chiddush in that. Work has nothing to do with achila. So from the fact that the Mishnah is trying to teach you a chiddush and saying ochel v'shasa in chayv la'achas, must be that the chiddush is hagam shtiyas b'chlal achila. So you could view it as if he was over twice on the Shevuah sheloi oichal because shtiyas also b'chlal achila, still in chayv la'achas. So that's how Rava proves it from our Mishnah. Amalei Abayas said, elamai shtiyas b'chlal achila. If you're going to prove from the ratio that shtiyas b'chlal achila ain't a seifa. Take a look at the Seifa. The Seifa says Shevuah sheloi oichel v'sheloi eshta v'ochel v'shasa chayev shtayim. He says both separately, right? He specifies achila and shtiya, and then he eats and he drinks. He's chayev shtayim. Asks the Gemara. Abaye asks a beautiful kasha. Kiven the omar sheloi oichel. Once he says sheloi oichel, itzulei b'shtiya. He already made a shevuah on shtiya as well, because you're assuming shtiya is b'chlal achila. So Shevuah sheloi oichel is already answering you on drinks. So ki omer shali eshta. So then when he follows it up with shali eshta, my chayiv. Why did he chayiv separately on that? Right? Ilu omer shali eshta trezimni mi mechayiv tarti. If he would have said a double shvuah in the same language, he said not going to drink, not going to drink. He can't be chayiv tarti. Why not? Because the second shvuah is not chal. Because he's already obligated in the first shvuah to be mekayim the dvar mitzvah. So if you're assuming that achila includes shtia, then once he says shvuah shelo yochel, the shali eshta shouldn't help. So how could the Mishnah say chayiv shtayim? Right? Beautiful kasha from Abaye. Omar leis. So Rava answered, Hasom the Omar shelo eshta, v'hader Omar shelo yochel. You're right. You have to change the order. First he said shelo eshta, and everybody agrees that if you say eshta, right? Nobody says I'll invite you over for a drink and I'll give you, and he gives him food. It works the other way around. So it must be he switched the order in that case, where he said shlo eshta first, and then it was chal on the shtia. V'hader shlo yochel, the shtia b'chlal achila, isa achila b'chlal shtia lesa. So then it was chal on the shtia first separately, and then on the achila afterwards separately, because shtia is, doesn't include achila, and that's why if you're over on both, you're chayiv shtayim. Aval omer shvuah shelo yochel v'shlo eshta, v'ochel v'shasa mai ein chayiv ala achas. Asks the Gemara. So what are you going to tell me? In the order of Eichel first and then Eshta, and then you violated both. You only chayiv one. If so, if that's really the assumption, Yochad Utani Reisha Shevuos Shelo Eichel v'Ochal v'Shasa Ein Chayiv L'Achas. So when you're telling me the first case of the Mishnah, then when he says Shelo Eichel alone, then he ends up eating and drinking, you only chayiv one. Listni Shevuos Shelo Eichel v'Shelo Eshta. Even if he specified v'Shelo Eshta in the chayiv l'achas, v'Koshke Shelo Eichel l'Chodei. Right? If you want to give me the bigger chiddush in the first case of the Mishnah, then give a chiddush where he specified achila and shtia, and still he's not chayiv l'achas. Why would you give me only a case of Shelo Eichel stama? So, right? Because according to this logic, once he says Shelo Eichel includes shtia,
very broad.
right, and therefore if it's very broad, so include it shti as soon as you uttered shalei eichel. So even if you said shalei eshta afterward, and then you eat and drink, you're not chayiv, only one. So the Mishnah could have given me that bigger chiddush. Why did the Mishnah limit it to a case of shvuah shalei eichel stam? That's the kasha. Says the Gemara, for that reason, we have to say, elo la'olam kediktani. Really, the Mishnah, you have to be goyrus in the way it's written. That Shevuos Shelo Eichel first v'Shelo Eshta, and still Ochel v'Shasa Chayiv Shtayim. Are you going to ask me why you Chayiv Shtayim? You already said Shelo Eichel, that included Shtia, so how could the other Shelo Eshta be Chal? Why you Chayiv on that separately? Right? Ain't Shvuah Chal al Shvuah. Says the Gemara Shiny Hocham. Here it's different. Kivin de Omar Shelo Eichel v'Hoder Omar Shelo Eshta. Once he says Shelo Eichel, and immediately is followed by Shelo Eshta, Goli Adaite, right away, he revealed the Hachachil da Omer Achil Gredasi. If you add this unnecessary statement afterwards by saying and specifying Shelo Eshta, so now you reveal that the Achila that you said, Terech Tadibur of that Shvuah, you only meant Achila and not Shti, and therefore you're Chayev twice. Omer Ravashi, Masnisim Nami Daika. It's also a raya from this very Mishnah that Shti is B'chlal Achila. Right, we're going back to Shti B'chlal Achila. Why? Because it says Shevuos Shelo Eichel, right at the end of the Mishnah. Guy says Shevuos Shelo Eichel v'Achal Eichel she'ein ruin l'Achila v'Shas Mashk she'ein ruin l'Shtia. Potter, right? It's Potter. Haru'uyin, what's the diak? But if it would be ru'uyin, if it's something that is edible or is drinkable, chayev. But v'amai Shevuos Shelo Eichel kamer. That's the case if we just said Shevuos Shelo Eichel. So there must be, you see from there, from that diak you see Eichel includes Shtia. Because you're only potter because each one is ein and ruyin. It's not really lachil, not really shtia. But vice versa, if it would be really lachil, you'd be chayiv. So how come you'd be chayiv? Must be shelo eichel includes shtia. Gemara says no, that's not a raya either. Because dilma de omar tarti shvuah shelo eichel shvuah shelo eshta. Could be that in that case he did say both. The Mishnah didn't bother to like firois that case because the chiddush was for the ein ruyin la'achila, ein ruyin l'shtia. That was the point. But it could be taka, that case would be a case of Shevuos Shelo Eichel, Shevuos Shelo Eshta, where he said it before-ish. But either way, what we're coming out with very clearly is that if somebody says Eichel, Achila includes Shtia. Okay. All right, so we are on the bottom of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. Shevuos lo oichel v'ochel pas chitin. Here we go in a case of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says, guy made a Shavua, I'm not going to eat generalized Shavua, and then he starts eating different types of breads. So the Gemara says, if you didn't specify the different types of breads in your Shavua, then you only chayev one. But if you specified in the original Shavua, he said, I'm not going to eat this type of bread, whole wheat, regular, white, rye, right, baguettes, whatever you describe, whatever you specify, then you're chayev on each one a separate carbon. The Gemara says, V'dilma, how do you know if he specifies each one in his Shavua, that he means to make a separate Shavua on each one? V'dilma, maybe his kavana is, L'mifter nafshei ma'achronaisa ka'asi. Maybe he's trying to tell you that don't asr me on everything. I just want to give you the list of what I'm asr because I want to be mutter and everything else. But my kavanah is not to create a separate shavua on each one of these breads. My kavanah is only to make the list of what I don't want to eat clear so that I don't become asr in all the foods. So his intention isn't to have the shavua bichal on the paschita and pasa'oyer and paskusman, each one individually, separately. His intention is to make one shavua. But he can't say Shevuos lo oichel stam, because then he'll be usher in all the foods. He doesn't want to be usher in all the foods. He says, okay, I'm going to make a Shevuah that I'm usher in all the breads and these types of breads, right? I'm going on a carb diet, a major carb diet, but I'm still going to have protein, I'm going to have vegetables, I'll have something else. What's it called?
A gluten-free diet.
A gluten-free diet, a keto diet. Okay. That's it. So maybe that's all he means to say. So the Gemara says, nah. See, we have to be very careful with his wording over here, because if that was his kavanah, havle lemeimar chitin esoiren v'kusmin. Okay, so give a list. Why is he giving the pas? Right, he's saying pasze and pasze and pasze. Extra word pas in between each one. The preface, the start passer and paskusmin. So Rashi explains that's lechalik. Obviously, his intention is to be mechalik the shavu on each one. So the Gemara says v'dilma lakais. Right? Maybe
Chewing.
he means to aser himself. If he would have said just chitn sa'orin, maybe it would have been interpreted as chewing. But maybe pas, if it would have been ground up and baked, maybe that it would have implied that he is allowed to eat. So therefore he has to say pas. To say that I'm asr, not just in chewing the chitin and sa'orin, I have to preface each one with pas, that I'm asring myself, even the bread, even once it's baked. So I still need it, and you don't have a raya that my intention is to be mechalik, to put on myself a shavua for each one. So Gemara says no. Then you should have said one pas in the beginning, and then each one would have been self-understood, self-explanatory that it's a pas. Asks the Gemara, still not enough. Maybe the pas only would have gone on the chitin of the first item of the list, and so the Gemara says no. The Havel Meimer still pas chitin v'shel sa'ir v'shel kusmin, and from the fact that he said pas by each one must be it's lachalik, and therefore he's chayiv on each one separately. Gemara says v'dilma al yidei tarayvis. If you would have said pas chitin v'shel sa'ir v'shel kusmin, it would have sounded like I'm only asking myself a pas that has a combination, a mixture of all these kinds of grains. So therefore I have to specify pas by each one, to say that each one individually is asur on me. But you still don't have a raya that I said it to be mechalik the shavua for each one. Right? Gemara says no. If that's his kavana, ema v'chein shel sa'orim v'chein shel kusmin, he still could have differentiated each one by saying v'chein shel sa'orim v'chein shel kusmin. Why is he saying pas lomali? Why is he emphasizing pas for each one? Shma mino l'chalik. From here the Mishnah knows that if a guy makes a shavua in such a way, then his intention is to individualize each one for a shavua. So it's unbelievable. Like every expression, the way, the manner, every letter, every word is analyzed and examined. And that's how the Gemara comes to this conclusion that pas is mechalik the shavua for each one. Okay, let's go to a similar case of shavua shali eshta. Before it was oichel and pas, now it's eshta. But if he separates and he specifies the drinks, right? Again, Similar case to Achila, where he says Shvuos Shlesh to Yayin v'Shemen Advash v'Shos Achayv Kalachas v'Achas. Says the Gemara, huh? Tomorrow, yeah, that's the Mishnah. Gemara says Bishlei Mahasam. I understand how by the pas you knew that from his language he means to differentiate, individualize each one for a Shavua, because the Amrit Miyatle pas l'chayuva, because he had an extra word pas in front of each grain. So that was l'chalik to make sure that the Shavuos is chal on each one separately, and that's why it's chayiv al kalachas v'achas. Elohacha, but over here by drinks, my havelei lemeimar. What else? How else could he have expressed it? Right? It wasn't no other extra word before yayin shemen advash like you had by chitin, kusman, and sa'oirin. So how do you know that he's coming to be mechalik the Shavuah? Same kasha. Here you have a kasha. My havelei lemeimar, locha my havelei lemeimar. Dilmul miftan avshem mashkin achrinikasi. He's just giving you a list of what kind of drinks he doesn't want to drink anymore, right? But it's not to say because he itemizes the drinks that he means to machalik the Shavuah kol echad v'chad. Maybe he's just saying these are the drinks that I want to ask for myself in one Shavuah. Amar Rav Papa over here. How do you know it's l'chalik hacha b'munachin lefanav askinan? Here we're talking about where the drinks are in front of him. Sha'iloi loymar Shavuah shalei eshte elu. Could have all included it. That's everybody would know. It doesn't have to go yayin, shem, and dvash. It's right in front of him. Menachem lefanav. So the Gemara says, no, elu wouldn't be enough. He does have to specify the general name of the drink. Because if he said elu, dilma elu blishasina, maybe only what's in front of me I'm not going to drink. This cup of wine. Achruina shasina, but the other ones I would. Elu da'omar Shavuah, dulashina kegoin elu. Could have added kegoin. Anything that's like this and anything that's like this. He still don't have to specify it. So if he's specifying, he's mechalik l'shua. Gemara says, Dilma kegoin elu still doesn't tell you as much as he wants you to know, because maybe that would be interpreted as l'shasina batzer mehachi. Utfei mehachi shasina. I'm not going to drink kegoin elu. Less than that. But more than that, I will. El kegoin da'amar Shavuah shali eshte mimin elu. The alternative way to say it would have been, I'm not going to drink anything that is mimin elu, this kind. V'dilma min elu d'lashasina ha'inu gufaya shasina. Maybe he means min elu in terms of like generally speaking, I'm not going to drink min elu, but these itself inu gufayu shasina. That can be interpreted that way also. Ema shali eshte elu uminayu. So here the Gemara says, the other way to say it, if he would have wanted to avoid a separate Shavuah on each one, he shouldn't have differentiated the names. He shouldn't have individualized them by name. He should have just said, Shleshte Elu Uminayu. And from the fact that he says Yayin separately, Shemen separately, Dvash separately, from there we hold him accountable for each one on a separate Shavuah. Rav Acha says, I have a different case in how we know that he meant to swear on each one. How do we know? It's a context, it was a situation. We're talking about where his friend was begging him to come. He says, come and drink with me wine, oil or honey. If the guy already mentioned in his invitation, Yayin Shemen Dvash, all he had to do was to respond, Shavuah Shalei Eshte Imcha, and from that conversation, I would know that he's referring to whatever his friend already mentioned. Why is he repeating it? Why is he repeating each one?
Interesting where he's referring to honey as like a shtia.
Right.
And oil. Oil's a chiddush too.
Yeah, oil is a chiddush also, right. Do we drink oil today?
It's added.
Do you know in Greece?
It's an interesting conversation.
In Greece,
Yeah.
everything with oil.
Like greasy. Grease is greasy, yeah.
Salad with
Just
oil.
a dad joke,
with oil.
yeah.
Everything, olive oil.
Olive oil.
Everything.
In Greece.
I think it's what I read. I think that in Greece, each person drinks or consume, I think at least a gallon of
But with their foods, you mean? But not. I'm saying here we're talking about drinking. You know.
I don't know, but
You know anybody that drinks oil? Anybody? No?
Doesn't the Gemara say that
Or anywhere.
It's unhealthy.
the Gemara in Bracha says you don't make
Yeah,
a
but
bracha?
the Rambam said that Dvaim Ishtanu.
Yeah.
Dvaim Ishtanu.
drink.
Does this mean that you have to drink it from a
You
vessel?
won't make a
When it says you have to drink it?
What is that?
Does it have to be drunk from a vessel? when it
Unless
says
if
here?
it's like an
Or can it be
onion,
drunk with
you
food
would make
if
a
it's a
bracha on it,
liquid?
but you wouldn't make
That's a good question.
Onion is
Right.
drinkable because-
Say,
Right. In other words, you're saying maybe the drink, but if you're being
Then you
metabolit,
still make a bracha, but you don't make
if
a
you're
bracha.
dipping in, I think that would have a din of food.
Yeah.
Not really. It wouldn't be a
Also,
shtieble.
you're not gonna say something.
It'd be a tuffle. Yeah.
Is that just normal?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
But
that would
oil's
be-
not good for you,
yeah.
so
You
you
say
don't
like
make a bracha at all.
shvuos and you raise salt.
It's not
Right.
edible. It's not
That's
drinkable.
more than
Right.
oil. Like oil.
Because salt is never eaten. It's always a tavlin. Right. It's always a. Yeah. Okay. Good point, Rocky. I'm not sure exactly why. Yeah, that's considered
Kasha on both.
a drink.
Kasha,
Dvash, I don't have such a issue with.
We can also be talking
Um,
about date honey.
Not-
What?
not-
Because we talk about date honey, which is more liquidy.
Which is more liquidy.
Maybe, I guess.
Right. Right.
There's different types of oil, honey. I think they are different.
Right. Like I said, nafkamina would be like how much do you have to eat
Yeah, because some people
to make a bracha achrayna? If it's food, it's kazayas. If it's drink, it's servias.
Right.
Some people take a spoon of honey, for example.
Uh huh.
So that much they would take. They wouldn't take a whole quart or a whole
Right.
few ounces, but they could take a spoon.
Like when we dip apple and honey on Rosh Hashanah, we don't say the bracha on honey, we say the bracha on the
On the apple, right? Because the honey is the tuffle, right? Like you're saying, right?
You don't make a bracha on water either. That's not chiddush necessarily, just because some things are just tough.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah, in Greece, they drink olive oil. They do drink olive oil in the morning.
They drink.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they drink-
Chat
But
GPT?
they're an exception.
Who you asking? Chat GPT?
It's not chat, it's the Google.
The Google. Okay.
Google.
Google AI.
We have to know who we can rely. Oh, AI. Okay, just say that.
Zelbazach.
Zelbazach. All AI.
AI over you.
Okay, so we have some people drink oil. That's interesting. So the case is, so we have two ways to answer how we know when a guy made a Shevuos le'eshta and he specifies yain shemer dvash. How do we know that his intention was to individualize each item for a separate Shevuah? Either because he could have said mi elu uminayu, and he didn't. He chose to specify each one. Or Rav Chaim says that it was in a situation where his friend was inviting him and he already mentioned it. Why do you have to repeat it in the Shevuah? Because he wanted to make sure that he asks himself each one with a separate Shevuah. Okay. So the Gemara, Tanan Hasam. We learned in the Mishnah later, a guy says, you know, I gave you a pikadon, chitin sa'ir v'kusman, different grains, and the person responds, Shavua she'ein lecha b'yadi klum. I swear I got nothing. You never gave me anything. So the halacha is, then he's found to be guilty. Ein chayiv, so he made a false shvua. Ein chayiv ala achas. He's chayiv for one false shvua. Hagam, the shvua was referencing different items because the claim was chitin sa'orin and kusman, and he generalized the shvua and he said she'ein li b'yadcha klum. So because he made the shvua in general terms, he's only chayiv one. But if in his response in his shvua he specified and he said shvua she'en lecha b'yadi chitin sa'orin v'kusmin chayiv al kol achas v'achas. If he says it separately, if he itemizes it in his response in his shvua, then he's chayiv on each one. V'omer Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan learned on that Mishnah. He said, "Afila pruto mikulam mitztarefes." Even a pruta from each one is mitztaref, right? In order to be chayiv and asham, you have to deny him at least a pruta. Pruta's worth, right? So what if, let's say, the chitin alone, he had less than a shava pruta. The sa'orin he had less than a shava pruta. But combined, if you're mitzvah of them, then he denied a shava pruta from his friend. So Rabbi Yochanan says, pruta mikula mitztarefes to be mechayiv on the shavua. Right. So the Gemara says, on this memra of Rabbi Yochanan, pligiba ravacha bravina. Chad omar aproti mechayiva, aklali loy mechayiv. V'chad omar aklali nami mechayiv. So in his response, when he says, right, Shavua she'ein lecha b'yadi, chitin sa'orin v'kusman. So really, what he's doing is, he's making 4 separate Shavuos, in essence. Why? Because he says Shavua she'ein lecha b'yadi. Stop right there. That's a general Shavua. Then he says, again, if the Shavua is chal on each one separately, so you have to consider the Shavua she'ein lecha b'yadi as a self-contained Shavua, then Shavua on the chitin, Shavua on the sa'orin, Shavua on the kusman. So here we have like this. Here we have a halacha of Rabbi Yochanan says you can be mitzdarif the chitin and sa'ir and the kusman to be mechayevim on a shava pruta if you have a shava pruta between all three. So Rav Achim are cholik whether you'd be chayev on the general shavua as well. Chad Omar a proti mechayev a kloli loy mechayev v'chad Omar a kloli nami mechayev. You also chayev separately on the first words of shua she'ein lecha biyadi. So hachamai over here in our Mishnah also. What's our Mishnah talking about? What's the case? He says shavua shaloi eshta, and then he specifies yain shemen dvash. So is there the same achloikas Ravach and Ravina have over there, whether you consider the first statement of shavua shaloi eshta as a generalized shavua, as a separate shavua, and then yain shemen dvash as three other shavuas, or do we say no? That's just a preface. Shavua shaloi eshta yain shemen dvash, which means in the end you only chayiv on three. Right, that's the Machlokes Ravach and Ravina over there in that Mishnah. When a guy denies his friend and he says Shavua she'ein lecha biyadi chitin sa'ir v'kusmin, right? So the shaila is, do you consider the first words of Shavua she'ein lecha biyadi as a separate Shavua, as a generalized Shavua on its own, and then chitin sa'ir v'kusmin as three other Shavuos? So in total you're chayiv on four, or not? Or the Shavua she'ein lecha biyadi is only a preface which is setting up the chitin sa'ir v'kusmin, and totally only chayiv on three. So Gemara says, would you have the same achloikas in our Mishnah? In the case of Shavua Shalei Eshta, and then he says Yain Shemen Advash, do you consider the Shalei Eshta as a Shavua on its own, and then Yain Shemen Advash is another three Shavuas, and you're chayiv on four? Kol Achas V'Achas means four, or no, it means three. That's the Shaila. Says the Gemara, Omar Rava, Hachi Hashta, Hasam Mechayiv HaKlala, or Mechayiv HaPrata. You can be Mechuyiv on the Klal and on the Prat. Dahi Meshtaba, V'Hodim Meshtaba, Mechayiv Tarti. Because over there, if you make a separate shavua, if you make two shavuas, even on the same item, you're still chayiv twice, because you're chayiv on the kfira. Right? You're chayiv on being koifer b'shavua. Hacha, isal kadaitich isa beklala, but over here, if you assered yourself, right, over there you're not assering anything, over there you're denying. Kfira b'shavua, you could do, if you're koifer twice on the same item, you're chayiv twice. So there it's possible to say that the Shavua She'ein Lecha Biyadi is a separate Shavua, because you could still say you're chayiv on that Shavua, and then you're chayiv again on each one separately, because it's a separate denial. But over here in our Mishnah, once you're telling me Shavua Shalei Eshta is already a Shavua that asers you in Yain, Shemen, and Dvash, then it wouldn't work on Yain, Shemen, and Dvash separately afterwards, because that would be a Mushba V'Oimid. So therefore over here you cannot say that the Shavua Shalei Eshta is considered a separate Shavua. Because if it's considered a separate Shavua, then there's next items, right? If it's all inclusive and it's considered a Shavua on all the items in a general way, in a general sense, then you wouldn't be able to be chayiv separately afterwards in each Shavua, because then you'd be considered mushba v'oimid. So if the Mishnah says chayiv kol achas v'achas, al koichach must be that you are not chayiv on the first three words of Shavua Shaloi Eshta. That's what must be. So I just want to end with a Maisa. We'll stop over here. I just want to end with the Geshmaka Maisa. So like 5 years ago, I was invited to speak at a Shabbaton. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy. His name is Ruby Shron. Ever heard of Ruby Shron? Big philanthropist, big Baal Tzedakah. All right, a very special Yid. Just to give you a context of how blessed he is in terms of finances, he was on the Forbes 500, not in the millions, let's just say in the billions. Okay, with a B, right? Right, I saw a photo of Elon Musk meeting the Saudi prince, and the caption was, "When billionaire meets trillionaire." Yeah.
Who's the billionaire meets trillionaire?
Yeah, I think it's, So go figure it out. Huh?
Saudi prince is trillionaire.
That's it. Yeah. Bottom line, his son, Morty Shron, Ruby's son, is a very special Yid. And every year, he makes a Shabbos for orphans, people who are Yisayimim, kids who are Yisayimim, teenagers. So he invited me to come and speak and to kind of connect with them and speak and give chizuk. And I came. And Shabbos, who was there? His father, Ruby Shron, was there and joined for Shabbos. So Shabbos day, Ruby gets up and he says, I'm open to any questions. I'm opening the floor to any questions. So one boy, I was sitting there and I couldn't believe it. Guy gets up, he's 14 years old. He says, Mr. Schroen, we all know that you're very wealthy. Why do you wear a simple suit? You don't wear designer clothes. Why do you drive a jalopy? Why do you drive a car that's 10 years old? Why do you still live in the same house for 40 years? You can afford a mansion. You can afford the best of the best. Why are you so simple in the way you appear? Okay, that was his question. I remember you can hear a pin drop, silence. People felt so uncomfortable. I was shifting in my seat. I was like, you didn't just ask that. Anyway, I'll never forget his response. I had Ruby's son, one of his kids was sitting next to me. He said to me after his father's response, he said, I had never heard this from my father in all the years. He said that when he first got married, he started dabbling in business. And he was learning first Seder in the Mir in Brooklyn. His Rebbe was Rav Shmuel Brudny. And he started seeing success in a supernatural way. It didn't make any sense. And he was able to afford a car. He was one of the only guys who had a car. And he would drive his Rebbe after first Seder from yeshiva back to home. So one day, he turns to his Rebbe and he says, you know, Rebbe, I'm starting to see incredible financial success. And I'm trying to define myself and understand my role and my responsibility. So if Shmuel Brudny, he had penetrating blue, deep blue eyes. He never stared at anybody. He looked at Ruby, and Ruby said this over that Shabbos. His Rebbe said, Ruvain, pull over. And he turned serious, and he said to him, Ruvain, there's a Gemara in Enriching. The Gemara in Enriching says that in the Beis HaMikdash there was a flute from eights, which was made of wood, and it was passed down Miyamos Moshe. It was a very special flute. It came from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu. They had it in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Levim would play on that flute. And it would make the most beautiful music. It produced the most beautiful sound. And the Levim were so taken by it, by its value and by its beauty, they decided to cover it with gold. It says the Gemara in Enriching. As soon as they covered it with gold, it never played the same beautiful music again. That was it. He said, Ruvain, never cover yourself with that gold. As soon as you do, you will never play the same beautiful music of a Ben Torah again. And he turned to this boy with tears in his eyes and he said, I want you to know it's been 60 plus years and I have not broken my promise to my Rebbe. And with that, he sat down. So we come into the Beis Medrash, we sing a beautiful song, and I feel deeply in my bones that Shevuos is coming. By the way, we're approaching a year since we started this year. And I think that we all are zocha to sing a very special song because of it. At least my life has been deeply impacted by this, where I sing a different song the whole day because I come to the daf. So chazak, v'nis chazak. Let's stop over here.